Vinny. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming out. My name is Jamani Williams, the councilman for the 45th District. We have a few people here I'm doing some comments with. Common Cause, Susan Lerner is here, Alice Kamada from Citizens Union, and also my colleague Vinny Gentili. We've also been joined by Leroy Comrie. Someone's here from Charles Barron's office, Indigo, and I think someone's here from Dennis Rodriguez's office as well. And Gail Brewer. So we're here today primarily because what happened on the primary last week, just a week ago today. Now, I've used the word voter disenfranchisement, and I'm going to use it again. I will say I don't think that it was intentional, but one of the reasons I believe that, I don't think any planned intentional disenfranchisement could have gone as smoothly to disenfranchise voters from what I saw this past Thursday. It was just incredible, and I hope it wasn't as bad in my district as it was around the city, although it wasn't bad around the city as I saw in my district, but I have heard some other anecdotal information. One, people just had no idea where they were to vote. They didn't know they had new polling sites. When they got there was trouble finding out where the polling sites were. I had senior citizens that were sent to 3 different polling sites, came back frustrated. I had one voter that was sent from East Flatbush. She took a cab to Borough Park, had to take a cab back because they sent it to the wrong place. I had dozens of voters who left without voting. This is from the poll worker. I had a poll worker who told me she was about to cry because of the amount of workers who were leaving without having voted. I personally brought back from outside of the voting building, who were on the way home, 7 to 9 people, and told them to do an affidavit, what was also called a paper ballot. I had one city who told me she was leaving because the poll worker told her that the affidavit and paper ballots would probably not be counted, and disencouraged her from filling that ballot out. This is unacceptable. And the biggest concern that I heard from those voters is what's going to happen in November when it comes time for them to vote for president. In addition to that, we had font size issues, and as you can see by the great billboard that Common Cause put out, at the bottom there is what people are expected to read. We also had language access, so I had seniors who couldn't read this and also speak Creole and had a hard time understanding what it is that they were supposed to do. Now I will say there are some resources that the Board of Elections have provided that many people just didn't know about. So there are several things I'm asking for that need to get done. One, when there's polling site changes or any kind of changes, the Board of Ed needs to send out not just one, but multiple correspondences to people who are registered to vote. And it should be in fonts and colors that will attract attention so people will know that it is important. 2, they should find other ways to communicate, whether it's on bus shelters, whether it's in commercials, whether it's in trains, so people understand that there are some changes that are going on. 2, 3, the font size needs to be bigger. We have to do better also with language access. And additionally, on the day of, the poll workers should be fully trained so that they're providing the same information to everyone. Most of the poll workers didn't even know that there was a great URL, great link to find out where you're supposed to vote that you could have gotten from your phone, from your iPad, from your iPod. They were busy with the books that are also confusing, but they didn't even know about that. Many people could have solved the problems of their own. So we have to do this twofold. We have to do it up to the day of election and on the day of. Because what I experienced was absolutely unacceptable. And for me, and I've been voting since I was 18, so that's about 18 years, this is the worst case of disenfranchisement although not intentional, the result was the same and it needs to be corrected. So I'd like to call up my colleague, who was one of the co-sponsors of the press conference, Mr. Chichilla.
Great, thank you, Giamatti. And I want to thank everybody who put this together. Whether rich or poor, young or old, regardless of creed or color, Election Day is a day when we're all equal, when we all have the same power to walk into that voting booth. But voting and that right to vote should not be a challenge. And we see more and more that voting is a challenge for many people. I can't tell you how many times I've heard from seniors in my district who told me that they were not going to vote because the voting poll that they had been close to a block away, half a block away, was now being changed and they were being sent a mile away or a half a mile away, and they were not going to vote because that is a challenge to them to get to that polling site. It really it's a responsibility that we have as elected officials, and I thank my colleague Giamatti Williams for making this such an issue, to really do whatever we can to strengthen and protect our right to vote. And my district has one of the largest senior populations per capita in New York City, and because of that, many of the people who go to vote have problems with their eyesight. And when you have problems with your eyesight and you have fonts that look like this, voting becomes a nightmare. And we should not present the challenge to people with eyesight problems to have to need a magnifying glass to see the names on the ballot. Printing names on the ballot are of utmost importance, and specifically for those with problems with their eyesight. We all know what Jimmy McMillan once said, that the rent is too damn high. Well, I say the font is too damn small. So, and that's something that we need to change right now. So I'm proud to join the Common Cause and all the citizen groups here, along with my two colleagues in government, to say that we can do a better job and the Board of Elections must do a better job. Thank you.
Next, we're going to have Susan Lerner from Common Cause.
Thank you, Council Member, and thank you, Council Member Gentili. I would like to echo what the Council Member said. We're not really interested in ascribing blame right now at this press conference. There's plenty of blame to go around. The voters want results. They want to be assured that the system is going to be improved. And there are specific things which the city, the board, and the legislature can do. What the voters need is for those three entities to get together, get on the same page, make the changes that are necessary. We need the city working through with the board and with the Voter Assistance Committee to send out postcards, reminding people if their polling place has been changed and where the polling place is to be found. We need the city to use its ability to put notices in the subways and on the bus stations and in the bus shelters, telling people to go to the app or to the board's website where to find the polling place information. And we need everybody to get together on the same page with the state legislature and make the revisions to the elections code that will prevent there being confusion as to how the ballot should be laid out and not have 7-point type in the ballot. So we need a cooperative effort, and it's got to be voters first, not finger pointing. Thank you.
Thank you. We're also excited to have probably the most important person on the City Council when it comes to dealing with the voting issues, Gail Brewer, who is the chair of GovOps.
Thank you, Councilmember Williams. He only called on me. It should be Councilmember Carver, because I was a little late because I was whispering and bugging him. I'm really honored to be here today, and I want to tell people that the Governmental Operations Committee will be having a hearing on October 15th at 2 p.m. either 250 Broadway probably, or maybe at City Hall, depending on the size of participants, to discuss a couple of things. First, the good news and the bad news. I'm always optimistic, and I want to explain that I think that there's a lot of good news that came out of this election. I was at the precincts, the 2-0 precincts, and other precincts to watch the, what I call memory sticks, some people call PMDs, whatever that stands for. But the fact of the matter is using technology to count the votes, 97% of the time was effective. And I think that's a positive for the Board of Elections. We also, just like the individuals who have commented thus far, many people, and I want to thank you, responded to the speaker's webpage, and to our survey, listing all the problems. Councilmember Drum was the star, I'll let you know. His community came through with lots of issues. All the ones that were described, font size, too far to walk, bad information. But I will tell you that some of our colleagues, nobody standing here, got the information at home and then didn't go to the right poll site. You gotta read your mail. I'm just throwing that out. You gotta read the mail. Now, could the mail be designed more effectively? Jamani and I are gonna help design it. The fact of the matter is, though, you gotta read it, and we're doing everything we can to get another mailing between now and Election Day. That is incredibly important because there have been changes. People didn't read the first mailing and didn't keep it, and they really need to know where to vote. I would also add that some of the complaints from the seniors, understandably, when you move a poll site, it can't be too far from your home because you can't actually walk there. So all of these issues have to be addressed very quickly. I do want to also mention that at this hearing, we will not only have a discussion about the oversight, but we will also talk about some of the good legislation that Common Cause and others, Citizens Union have brought to our attention, the council members have sponsored, and hopefully we'll address what we can at the city level, because the font size, I think, has to be addressed in some extent on the state level, and we really want Assemblymember Kavanaugh and Senator Marty Golden's bill to pass. They actually had a brilliant idea. Take some of the stuff that's on the page now off. Not anybody's name, but there are little doodads and there's directions, all that stuff you don't need. And then guess what? You can actually increase the font size. Why that takes a whole piece of legislation to do, I don't know, but it does. So all of these issues we will talk about on October 15th. I want to say it is not hard to find the poll site and ballot sample, but working with DoIT and the Board of Elections, I help push for that. You got to go to the website if you can. A lot of seniors cannot. A lot of people do not have that opportunity. So we need to do the mailing, and we need to do everything we can between now and November 6th to accommodate all these issues. Thank you, Jamani Williams, and thank you.
Next, we'll have Alex Murata from Citizen Union, who also co-sponsored the press conference.
Good afternoon. My name is Alex Camarda. I'm the Director of Public Policy and Advocacy at Citizens Union. I think you heard from the council members and from Susan many of the problems that existed on Election Day and some of the challenges the board faces. I'm going to focus on some of the solutions, some of which were mentioned. It's very important that the council and the mayor fund this mailing that the board just voted on Tuesday. It's a mailing that will go to all registered voters, telling them where their poll site is. They did this in August as is required by law, but for the first time ever, to my knowledge, they voted in favor of doing this between the primary and the general election. It's an additional piece of notification. You heard from others about the sample ballot online as well as the poll site locator, which is in an application form and on the website. It would be very helpful if the media on Election Day made voters aware of these things so they could go to the site, download the app, look at the poll site locator on Election Day, and that would diminish some of the confusion. Longer term, we've been working on trying to make the ballot clearer. You saw the issue with the font size. The city board is constricted to some degree by state law. However, there are things they can do administratively that would declutter the ballot and enable the font size to be larger. First and foremost, they could do bilingual ballots. These would be ballots with English and one other language rather than up to 5 languages on the ballot. I have a copy here of a sample ballot for the November election, which people can look at afterwards, but it's very cluttered. I think clutter is the biggest problem. And to the board's credit, they are working on this. The Good Government community sent them a letter in April 27th to be exact, following meeting of the commissioners, they voted in favor of having the staff look at this issue in greater detail. I have some memos I can share with you that show their latest progress. It is something that they're doing. I want to give them credit for that. Unfortunately, it was not in time for this election. We expect that it will be by 2013. Simultaneously, Kavanaugh and Golden are working on this bill at the state level, which would clean up other aspects of the ballot. We want that to pass. The governor's office is involved as well. We hope it will be in 2013 and we won't have these problems for the city elections. Because frankly, next year, with the 2013 elections, the number of open seats you have in the council, there are going to be very many candidates for each of those races on the ballot. It's going to be impossible to do the ballot unless the law changes and the board acts administratively to address these issues. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next up, besides myself and Councilmember Gentili, other co-sponsors of the first comments, Councilmember Tish James.
First, let me thank my colleagues, Councilmember Williams and Gentili, for convening this, as well as the chair, Councilmember Gail Brewer, and the deputy speaker for allowing me to speak prior to making the statement. Of course, Susan Lerner. The focus has primarily been on the font and the apps. And I don't want to really focus on the apps and or the font, because the reality is that in my district, there are still technology gaps, and not all of us use technology. And so my constituents, for the most part, will not use apps, and they rarely use technology. And let me just say at the outset that the Brooklyn Board of Elections does a fabulous job, and I'm not here to criticize what they have done. I think we've got to do a better job, elected officials and stakeholders. When we engaged in redistricting on the state level, there was a disconnect between what we were constitutionally mandated to do and informing our constituents. And so a lot of constituents called my office on election day and said, I wanted to vote for so-and-so, and I didn't, and I'm no longer in their district. I don't understand. And so all of the legislation that we have proposed is good, is a good step forward. But the reality is that all of us have a responsibility to work with the Board of Elections and go to where the people are. And that's critical. We really need to educate them with regards to redistricting, and regard to change of polling sites, and regards to the certain elections and who is running for office. And so really my remarks today is, though there was major confusion in the 35th district, and yes, despite what Assemblymember Kareem Kamara had asked him, and that is that notices go out to his constituents alerting them that there was no primary in the 43rd Assembly District, which did not happen, and individuals went to the boards anyway, went out to vote anyway, notwithstanding the fact that there was no primary. All of us have a responsibility and a duty to make sure our basic and most fundamental right is exercised, and that is the right to vote. And to do that, we need to educate voters about the change in lines, change in redistricting, who is on the ballot, and where their polling site is. I am committed to working with the Board of Elections to do just that. Legislation is fine, but we really need to get boots on the ground and to make sure people are empowered to know about the right to vote. Thank you.
Well, I also want to say that Councilman Brad Lander was here as well. Last but definitely not least, and I want to thank you because he came early. Very appreciate all of the council members. Deputy Majority Leader Leroy Compton.
I'm here today to also echo the fact that there were major problems throughout the city, especially impacting our seniors. On election day, my office was flooded with calls because a lot of people did not realize that the information that was sent out to them were their actual new registration cards. The way that the information was sent out, they thought it was just a FYI piece of information and not the only piece of information that they had. That can be improved administratively. We need to make sure that that happens. I agree with Councilmember James. Most of my district, which is a NORC, a vertical NORC, because I have homeowners, are not going to look at apps or going on the computer. They're calling my office or they're reaching out to someone. There's also a major problem with how many of the poll sites were changed for seniors, and we need to go back and look at that for this November's election, because we want to make sure that we have maximum turnout and maximum participation in what I anticipate will be as momentous a day as it was 4 years ago in 2008. So to have a senior that used to have to walk 1 block to their school now have to go to 2 miles away to vote is unconscionable. So we need to work with the Board of Elections to make those changes now. The font size also was a major problem for our constituents, most of whom don't use glasses even though they're supposed to. They could not see the font. And there's a way to clean that up with a good printer. We don't need legislation to do that. You don't need to be restricted by sizes. If the ballot is showing all that empty space on the sides of the ballot, fill that page up. Why do we need to wait for something else to happen? So, you know, I'm here today to support everyone that's here, Common Cause, Councilmember Williams, Councilmember Gentili for everything that they've done. But I'm here also to appeal to the Board of Elections to work with our communities, because there were too many poll sites that were changed that are disenfranchising seniors and people that have a habit to vote in their local communities. I understand some of the needs were done because of claims of access issues, but people are used to walking to vote. We need to make that the primary access for people, not that people have to travel outside of their home communities to go vote. And that's a major problem throughout the city that I got feedback from many members and many constituents that they had to move from their local area that they were willing to go to vote, to have to go outside of their home community to vote. It did not make sense in the real aggregate, and that needs to be changed for the November election. Thank you.
Thank you. Before we have the real last but not least speaker, I just want to make sure everybody makes notice. We have 3 different boroughs represented. We have Brooklyn here, we have Queens here, and we have Manhattan, which means it was definitely more than 1 borough. And I want to make sure the media gets a good look at this font size here. I mean, who do you expect to read that? I hope you guys get a good picture of what that looks like, because it's a big problem. Next up, I want to call Brad Lander, who will round us out, and then we'll take some questions.
Thank you. I may be least as well as those. I want to thank Councilmember Williams, Councilmember Gentili, Common Cause, and I also really want to thank Gail Brewer for the leadership that she's taken in the council on these issues. Election day was frustrating in my district for people for a slightly different set of reasons. A whole set of people went to their traditional polling site. Took them a long time to figure out they weren't supposed to be there, and go to a second polling site, blocks and blocks away, only to realize then that they didn't have an election to vote in at all, because there was no election in their election district on that day. And so no one was disenfranchised, but a very substantial number of people were needlessly frustrated, wasted their time, and don't feel as confident in the future. I will just add to the list of some simple things that I think we can do. First, I am sponsoring a bill that's been heard in the Government Operations Committee and that I believe has a lot of support. A very simple thing that the Board of Elections needs to provide data like every other agency to the Mayor's Management Report, so we can really keep track of where the flaws are, what's working, what's not working. Agencies need to work with us to define what that data is, and I'm hopeful that we'll be able to move forward and make that happen, so that we're not just here after every election doing a press conference and Gail doing a follow-up hearing, but so that like every other agency, we've got a set of data that we look at annually, that we can compare from year to year, and have some real accountability. Second, it's not going to work for every senior, but I do think that the fact that you can't get this information by email and text doesn't make any sense. That the web app is great. It's very easy to find where your poll site is. It would have been a whole lot easier for people if they could have just signed up online with their email address and their text and been received. Your poll site's new, check the web tracker app. That's not going to solve all our problems, doesn't change the need for mailing, doesn't change the need for font size, but is one more way of communicating people. It was a lot of fun to see the Board of Elections tweeting back and forth with Councilmember Williams on Election Day, but it would have been a lot more useful to use the social networking technology to tell people where they were going to vote and what was going to be on the ballot. So let's get that done. And finally, I started doing that, making sure to tell people where to vote using the new BOE website, an app which is pretty convenient. But when I went to polling sites, they were still using that good old-fashioned, like 18th century technology of the Street Finder, where you have to go to 2 different books, one to look up where people are, and then a different piece of paper. And so they hadn't even told their own poll workers that there was this great new piece of technology to make it a lot easier to tell people where to vote. So again, like Gail, something good that happened. I do think the website is good, the app is good, but we got to make sure we're taking advantage of it in a way that's comprehensive and that lets as many people as possible know where to vote as conveniently and simply as we possibly can. Thanks again, Tony.
I do want to say, one, again, I don't think the BOA did this intentionally. And I also want to echo what my colleague said. We do have to be on the same wavelength in trying to help fix this together, because whether it's intentional or not, it was terrible and was disenfranchising. And in the history in our minds are still the elections of dimple what is it called? Hanging chads. And we don't want to have that here when it's time to vote for election day again for president. Also, the Board of Election does have wonderful resources. I took a tour after a poll worker showed me a machine where if you're blind and a wheelchair, if you're deaf, they can help you read it. They can do a lot of things. I didn't even know that existed. So I know voters don't know it existed, and I don't know why poll workers also didn't know it existed. So there's some things that we can do simply to make sure this doesn't happen again. And I'm wondering if we have any questions that everybody needs to ask.
You said it's the worst case of disenfranchisement that you've seen in your time voting. Do you have numbers that back that up, or is this just kind of anecdotal?
Mine was anecdotal. I'll say it was anecdotal. For as long as I've been voting and working on campaigns. I mean, I was out there working on a campaign. I had to make the decision to either continue helping my candidate or help the voters that were coming out going home without voting. And I chose to help the voters because that's very important to me. But that's something I've just never had to do. Every time I walked into the poll site, someone was screaming and yelling, saying, "Thank God you came, I was about to leave." So mine is anecdotal.
Do you have any data from your poll workers?
We can try to get some. I just know the amount of people who leave.
What of elections are doing that?
But nothing today. You don't have anything today.
No.
Okay.
The issues you guys are mostly listing out are surface level issues. So is there anything structural that should be done on like the political basis that a lot of board of elections people are selected?
Political?
Yes.
Town hall meetings.
I haven't delved in that part of it, so town hall meetings would be good. But these are the issues that I saw, and we are coming up with some things that we think would help fix it. I'm not sure it was about who's where.
Are you looking for more structural solutions, or are these surface level solutions?
So, quite frankly, at Common Cause, we've been advocating for a wholesale review of our election law because it's been changed in bits and pieces that don't fit together, that don't necessarily track 21st century technology. So yes, we believe it's time to bring New York's election law into the 21st century and to depoliticize our election administration so that it is nonpartisan and as efficient and effective as possible. We believe there is absolutely a place for parties in election oversight, but we need to be sure that we have the most professional, most efficient use of taxpayer resources in election administration, and that will require, over time, a wholesale recasting of how we administer our elections in New York.
I want to be one, and so specifically, there is a bill pending that city workers would be able to have the time to be poll workers. And that's something that's very specific that we can do locally to answer your question.
Hold on, someone else wants to address that.
Yeah, I just want to note that Citizens Union and our good governing colleagues, we've been working on a number of bills, some of which were just mentioned, that the council is going to be doing a hearing on the 15th that we think address some of these structural issues. And I should mention beyond those bills, this is not in bill form yet, but Governor Cuomo recently worked to ensure that the DMV would go on the DMV's website and change your address online if you're already registered. Register for the first time if you have a driver's license or a non-driver's photo ID. And he put in place an automation that will enable registration forms that are completed at the DMV to be sent more easily to the boards of elections. There's nothing that I'm aware of that prohibits that being done for city agencies, which are also obligated to register voters. Numerous city agencies, when you go for services for the agency, you are given the opportunity to register to vote. It's all paper-based. We really need to take that into the 21st century and automate it where we can. And that's a systemic fix. That's not in bill form, it's just out there.
For the council members present, are you guys planning to approve the $1.6 million to get the second mailer out?
have already made informal requests to the Office of Management and Budget, and also the Speaker's Office is aware of the need. It came up at the Board of Elections meeting, which I attended on Tuesday personally, so we're trying to get it in motion. Nothing's been decided yet.
I just wanted to follow up on Colin's question, though, but for the council members who are up here, do you support, there have been calls from the mayor to change the structure of the Board of Elections, to depoliticize it, make it a nonpartisan entity? Do you support that idea, that it shouldn't be run by the political parties at all?
I don't know exactly what he put out there. I'm always welcome to change. I don't know. Everything's going to be partisan in some part, so it depends what it is he wants to change it to. So I'd have to do some more research to see what it is.
Do you think right now the political parties, the Republican and the Democratic parties, control the board? They appoint the board members. I mean, the commissioners, do you support the current structure, or do you think it needs to change?
I mean, today what I want to concentrate on is what happened on primary day and make sure it doesn't happen again for the presidential election. So what I want to concentrate on is how we can make sure that doesn't happen. So those are all deeper issues that I'm happy to speak about. But there are things like making sure that we close the digital divide because the BOE is a good job with technology, but everybody's not going to get to that. Those are things that I think are better right now to focus on. So I want to focus on changes that can happen before the presidential election to make sure those errors don't happen.
I also want to point out that there is a role for citizens. One of the projects that we have at Common Cause is a project that we call Cut the Line. We're recruiting CUNY students and others who have smartphones to be outside the polling place to help people look up their polling site location and to help cut that immediate info line. So, echoing what Councilwoman James said, we can all be involved and we all have to have responsibility for making our elections work right. It's not just on the board, it's our responsibility as citizens.
The complaints that you've made sound as if people that wanted to vote weren't able to, and that there's no real oversight or accountability at the polling site. I'm wondering if you've heard any complaints about people voting who perhaps should not have been voting.
I didn't hear too much about that. Most of the complaints I heard of people who wanted to vote couldn't vote, and people were leaving in droves. And some of the information that I think the poll workers should have known, not knowing, or they're not getting the same information from everybody. So those are the primary things that I heard. And I also agree that it's not just the board, it's all of us together figuring this out. But it's just a major concern in total, because the presidential election is coming up, and that's my biggest concern. I don't want any hanging chads, I don't want any problems here. I want people to be able to vote for the candidate that they think is best to vote for.
And in addition to people being too far away from a polling site to go, there were instances of people going to a polling site and not the correct polling site and not having their names on the registration books. So that caused a lot of frustration because those people had their names previously on those books. So there's some systemic problem there also.
I had whole block associations that were very confused, and some of them just went back home. We got one more.
Can somebody speak to the font issue? I mean, is this the first time that it's been that small? Was it bigger in the past? I'm just confused as to what happened to make it so small this time.
I mean, I had heard, this is anecdotal, that they have a duty to get everybody's name the same size, and there was some other information that they had to put on there. I think it was a language they had to put on there, so they were forced to make the name smaller so they could fit everybody's name.
So this is smaller than it's sort of ever been as far as anyone knows?
Yes, as far as we know, yes, this has been a problem. And it's again, I think it's a confusion in terms of interpretation of the state law and how you interpret it. So the law needs to be tightened up. The board needs to be a little more creative. As I said, I don't think it's any one entity that is at fault, but we had the perfect storm that ended up with unreadable ballots, and we just can't have that in the future.
So we're all looking forward to working with the Board of Elections and figuring out what our part is to make sure this doesn't happen in November. Thank you very much. Have a great day.